Welcome to the third video in my Yakuza series. At every $100 reached on Patreon, I go to the next entry in this mostly fantastic crime epic. These videos chart a mostly chronological exploration of my thoughts and feelings on each entry. They don't shy away from spoilers, but I do try to keep them to the end as best I can, and I assume a degree of familiarity with the series for the best viewing experience. They are long, but I do keep an index in the description for those who wish to watch in chunks. I would recommend watching the previous two videos if you haven't done so already. So, we're at the third entry at $300. This numbering will make perfect sense until I hit Yakuza 0 at 600. I could have done it for nothing, but I'm not really that clever. Today we reach an interesting personal point in my journey back through the series. Yakuza 3 was my introduction, and I last played it near a decade ago. I can remember very few specifics from that first go-around. I'm left with more general feelings, a few scattered plot beats, no specifics, and the wider context of how this entry is seen by other Yakuza fans. Back then, I'd heard of this big Japanese free-roaming series where I could beat up men with anything I could get my hands on, play a ton of minigames. It's filled with funny sub-stories and I can throw people into rivers and such. And it also had a plot that people seemed to like, I guess. That wasn't as important. I was on holiday in the English coast. Not during summer and not somewhere all that interesting. I had just gotten a PS3, same one I used to record footage for this video actually, and I blitzed through the game because I had nothing else to do. So, what did I feel? Well, from what I remember, my feelings are sort of limp. To summarize, Yakuza 3 was good enough to get me to Yakuza 4. The plot probably spun me in circles, went in one end and out the other. I couldn't remember who anyone was from moment to moment, and all the returning characters meant nothing. I had no idea why the Nishiki family would mean anything to Kiryu. I got that this guy was related to Dad, but that didn't land. And speaking of Kiryu, he felt stodgy and awkward as a protagonist. He acted so differently from anything I was used to. He was like an honor-bound robot. Not to mention, why do I keep going back to this bloody orphanage? We've got a conspiracy to bust. I mean, yeah, turns out I wasn't wrong about everything. You can bet back then I wasn't watching the Reminisce stuff. I wasn't putting an hour down on that. And playing a game that lets me experience a slice of Japanese culture with a game that, proudly, sort of, shows off its home to the world, didn't mean anything to me then, not as much as it does now. Now I appreciate getting that insight. I've stated in the past, I don't care where people choose to jump in with series. Their business, their time, their life. But I can't pretend you won't often lose out by doing so. It is a disservice to the story and oftentimes to yourself. Even when you can learn what happened before, which Yakuza has as a built-in feature, learning from a recap still differs from actual investment. This replay of Yakuza 3 all these years later, now that I have played everything else in the series and am way more invested, let me spot a ton of little callbacks, details, understand ongoing character relationships, and get more out of the same story than the first time around. I still stand by what I said, but I know that it is a viewpoint with a caveat. People can come in at will. If people didn't come in at 0, I doubt we'd be seeing Shin Yakuza in the West. I doubt we'd have seen 6. Anyway, this is all stuff that surrounds the series. Now that I'm back, armed with knowledge from entries past and future, I can approach Yakuza 3 with a much fuller context. So, let's talk about this box. Yeah, since we're on a console not emulating, this time we have hardware. I did not miss 720p, but I do miss anti-aliasing. I apologise if this footage quality is off-putting to some, since I'm in the same boat, but this gives us a rare opportunity to talk box art, and what we got in the West is absolutely atrocious. The game's box is its first impression, a way to let you in on key details and give you a more informed purchase, well, hopefully just plain having something nice to look at. So this box art does give me two things. It's definitely Japanese, and Kiryu has yet to figure out a selfie. Compared to the Japanese box art, this may be my favourite image from the series. It's gorgeous, and it's what we should be seeing if we ever get that re-release. Sort of. Buckle in because I'm complaining about the removal of a cigarette. I understand it sanitizes the cover a bit and likely saves some people at Sega a headache they don't care to deal with. On the other hand, the cigarette actually does a ton for this image. It gives context. Kiryu is having a smoke, looking up at the sky. It's contemplative. Is he planning his next move or reflecting on what has brought him to this point? It clues you in on there being a big story focus, a whirlwind of events to get caught up in. It also brings with it some shorthand. In media, cigarettes give a degree of edge to a character. It doesn't say he's a bad guy, but it lets you know they aren't entirely straight-laced. This Kiryu is a former criminal trying to go straight, but the underworld keeps dragging him back, and he's got to tread muddy waters and figure out a way through the hard path ahead. This Kiryu spotted a collectible. This cover's good too. This is Kenzan. I've imported a copy. And Ishin. Finally. A lot of gameplay improvements found in 3 actually made their debut here. It's a panto of sorts, with Yakuza characters taking on the roles of major figures from the Edo period. Kiryu Kazuma is Miyamoto Musashi, occasionally disguised as... Kazuma no Sake Kiryu. I probably butchered that anyway. The gameplay expands on weapon use and combat, adding a quick select function that will one day become Zero's style switching. Neither Kenzan or Ishin have seen localization, but it seems more hopeful these days, and as PS3 emulation develops, fan localization efforts have come a way, along with a good number of online guides and subtitled cutscenes. You can very much play this game if you import it, there are resources out there to do so. I just don't envy whoever is going to give up on Karuta. The PS3 was a bit of a bastard system to develop for, so Kenzan exists for Yakuza teams to familiarize themselves with new hardware, tell a different story, and experiment with what they can do before jumping into a new mainline entry. No doubt a good move. We rejoin Kiryu on the beaches of Okinawa. A life spent in the Yakuza has given Kiryu a rather strange, direct, if effective method of fishing we sadly will not be able to replicate. He's now running an orphanage. The kids are happy and healthy, and Kiryu looks to have taken on the role of non-crime dad well. Or at least, that's how it seems. Uncle Rukia visits with dire news. Nakahara has been shot. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Daigo, now in his place as 6th chairman of the Tojo, is still recovering from the financial losses the last few years have brought onto the clan. It's being kept afloat by the income of the new Hakuho family. They are pretty much all that's standing between them and collapse. There's an Okinawa deal in place that could solve the clan's money troubles, but it would see the Tojo effectively kicking Kiryu off his land, so Daigo says they'll have no part of it. Suddenly worried someone might make a move without him, Daigo orders a return to headquarters. It's there he has a guest in his office, where he comes face to face with a familiar figure, Wesker! And Fuma.
Kazuma-san.
A deed is presented to Daigo, the deed to Kiryu's land. Fuma tells him that the Tojo walking away from the deal is not an option. Daigo tries to remain defiant, but when the lookalike reaches into his breast pocket, Daigo attempts to draw first. Back in Okinawa, Kiryu rushes down a hospital corridor to see Nakahara. He's in surgery and right now it is touch and go. Saki, a young girl in Nakahara's care, managed to sketch an image of his attacker, revealing that self-same man. Hang on a second. We then jump back to January 2007, a month following the events of Yakuza 2. As was the case last time, we once again open in a cemetery. We can recap from the graves of Nishiki, Yumi, and Fuma, but their ranks are now joined by Yukio Torada, or Daijin Kim, as Kiryu doesn't remember him. Regardless, Kiryu characteristically sees him in the best light, as a man who taught him to trust in people even when things look their darkest. Then he pisses on his memory, hoping he'll watch over the Tojo until it becomes the organization he wanted it to be. Kiryu, mate, he wanted it to be rubble, you big fucking softy. Sayama and Kiryu are parting ways. Kiryu is taking over an orphanage following the former manager's passing. He was asked to find a man for the job and decided to take on the responsibility for himself. Sayama is off to be a police instructor in the States, and despite all that is said here, after this scene she is written out of the series. Well, I'll see you in Shin Yakuza. Wondering where the hell Kiryu went. I do have mixed feelings about Sayama being written out, especially the way it's been done. Date and Sudo watch from the sidelines, surprised their relationship wasn't romantic. Indeed, on the new updated character chart which shows each character's relationship to one another, they are listed as good friends. Their relationship was platonic at most, quickly undoing the note Yakuza 2 tried to end them on. I do get why, removing her as a romantic interest is in service to the gameplay. A lot of activities start casting Kiryu in a really dark light if he is in a relationship, and I doubt the developers want players feeling like that. But then removing her as a romantic partner already solves the issue that necessitates writing her out completely. From a story perspective, it's a bit murkier. Her arc in Yakuza 2 is resolved, she can move on. In fact, by becoming a police instructor in the States, she is demonstrating that she has moved on. She doesn't need to do anything more here, she has effectively served her role, and Yakuza 3 gives closure to her arc while keeping the door open. She just never walks back through. Date in this same title stops working for the police to become a journalist. That pivot feels strange in that it feels like it's giving Sayama a place in the story that she isn't taking. In fact, she's already left. So she and Date wouldn't really render each other redundant anyway. Yakuza is a series where even terribly minor characters, even those who never turn up in the main story, can return and develop between entries. The removal of Sayama isn't a bad thing, she didn't need to return, but characters bigger and smaller have, so it does stand out in a series that relishes in continuity and following characters over the years. A lot of Chapter 1 follows in tying up the loose ends of Yakuza 2. I enjoy it for a few reasons. Kiryu makes a last set of rounds in Kamurocho, optionally taking a stroll with Haruka, saying goodbye to everyone else important to his journey a month prior and the city itself, before headed off to make a request of Majima. Kiryu wants him to lend his support to Daigo as he takes his chairman's spot. Naturally, Majima wants something in return. How much stock Yakuza places in its continuity is always something I've respected. Events from previous games carry knock-on effects, predictable and otherwise. The changing circumstances of characters and groups major and minor are fun to chart. Attention is rewarded by letting you see this tapestry of characters grow and evolve. Sudo notes how the police are running damage control following the Jingwan's attempted bombing. The Yakuza saved the city and a high-ranking police official was one of the terrorists. Sudo and others got hush promotions and they've had to distance themselves from the Yakuza for the time being. Sudo notes that it's terrifying that Kiryu, the most reasonable figure within the Tojo, is leaving right now. What I find most interesting about this chapter, however, is that we get to see something so rare. We get to see Kiryu being proactive. He placed Daigo as 6th chairman, now he's not just leaving and hoping it pans out on his own, he's scheming, being smart in realizing the people more senior than Daigo are hardly going to respect their new superior. So Kiryu leverages Majima's love of chaos and havoc to tell him that supporting Daigo will give him plenty of heads to bust and people to keep in line. We rarely get to see Kiryu apply his knowledge of the Yakuza and the people he knows so cleverly and with a purpose he decides on for himself. It also plays up that Kiryu really is at the top of this underworld. Throughout the whole ordeal, he is hounded by low-ranking Fuma family thugs who fail to recognize the Dragon of Dojima. Kiryu sends them packing repeatedly until it takes their boss coming out of the woodwork to come and tell them who they're picking a fight with, at which point they are rightfully terrified. We once again have the optional Haruka Trust system, a small way to encourage tackling some mini-games with specific goals and challenges. Oh yeah, sure thing, I love pool. And now Haruka doesn't love me. It's only for items and optional completion stuff. It can be entirely skipped besides all that. It can also be a wee bit of a bugger to get Haruka to trigger. Honestly, if you don't know that it's finicky and you occasionally have to sit around shops or exit and enter, it's actually downright elusive, and a player who doesn't know that it's sort of busted may miss that it's even there. I really shouldn't buy her this. I should not allow Haruka to raise her heat. It's a short section overall, even more so if you ignore Haruka, but it serves more as an epilogue for 2 than the beginning of 3, doing what it needs to and moving on quickly. A lesson our next topic could have done well to learn. There are 2 primary points of contention people have with Yakuza 3. Cut content and the orphanage, and funnily I found the latter could have done well with some of the former. Let's go over some plot. We rejoin Kiryu in summer 2007. Now he has a number of kids under his care. He heads to dinner, finding that one of them, Izumi, is missing. He tells the kids to go ahead and eat. He'll go and find her. Outside, we see the Sunshine Orphanage is in a beautiful beachfront location. Talking with the neighbors reveals Kiryu is getting along well in this new town, though that one may be aware that Kiryu is just standing right behind them. We find Izumi on the beach. She recently came to the orphanage following the deaths of her mother and father. She's already teased for being an orphan, and with Parent Day coming up, the loss is weighing heavily on her. Kiryu, joined by Haruka, assure her that everyone at the orphanage are as real a family as any. They're able to raise her spirits and bring her back to the dinner table, where we find out that no one has began eating without them. We then jump again to March 2008. The orphanage receives an eviction notice from the Ryudo family, a local Yakuza outfit. Thugs are hanging around outside. They run at the sight of Kiryu, so he heads off to confront them properly, telling Haruka not to worry. He's not going picking fights, as if he ever needed to. What follows is Kiryu battling with the Ryudo family. He meets the new iteration of Daigo? No, Sayama, that's it. It's Rikiya. Kiryu defeats him despite Rikiya bragging about how his Viper represents Okinawan spirit. Yeah, never do that. It just makes it bad for everyone involved when you lose. And then we get to meet Nakahara. Kiryu attempts to fight the eviction, but unlike Rikiya, this isn't a contest of fists.
内地から来たガキに説教されるほど追い惚れちゃいねえ。あんた、
本当にそれでいいと思っているのか。
あ
今俺をここで殺して子供たちを追い出してあんたそれで満足なのか。
Kiryu leaves with the threat of eviction still looming over his head. We then cut to a news report on the construction of a resort. This resort would see Kiryu losing the orphanage. It's built on his land. Along with that is another bill pushing for the expansion of a military base in Okinawa. These two competing bills are championed between feuding politicians Tamiya and Suzuki. Also, Shiro is getting bullied, so we're going to spend at least half an hour sorting out that shit. It will tragically involve golfing. You saw how many kids there were at dinner, right? They've all got problems, each of them. And Kiryu, heroic, somewhat crime, somewhat dad that he is going to solve each and every one of them, putting aside any and all business to do so. Say what you want, but the man loves his kids. People take issue with the orphanage for taking time away from the plot to devote to Kiryu child-minding. It not only slows you down, it kills the pace as these events aren't threaded into the ongoing gangster story you are here for. They instead intersect and interrupt these events. With Shiro, it's reasonable. Kiryu is waiting on Nakahara to make his move, so he has the time to spend. But later, he'll stop chasing the actual conspiracy for these errands. He spends a day following Haruka, at first worried she has a boyfriend, then realizing she has a shady job. And this is on the same day he has to be on call at any moment to stop an assassination. And this little arc comes in within hours of the finale. This is hardly the first time Yakuza has had moments devoted to more mundane issues. Yakuza 1 had a whole chapter about father issues. Yakuza 2 slowed things down with parts focusing on Kiryu's relationships with Sayama and Haruka, and once again dealing with Kage's Sprog. But these were characters who were truly along for the ride with Kiryu, who were lending him aid and who had a participatory role in these plots. Not to mention the fact they were used sparingly. They were breaks in the story, but they still complemented it. Meanwhile, from memory, Shiro is bullied, Taichi wants to wrestle but can't, Akira has a weak constitution but wants to play with the orphanage kids, Haruka may have a boyfriend, Izumi wants a dog, Mitsuo is crushing on Riona but she's racist or something, Ayako is unappreciated and someone lost their money. These chew into the runtime and bring everything around them to a screeching halt. The most glaring part of all of this is that Izumi's moment at the beginning did exactly what these kid problems set out to do. Demonstrate that Kiryu cares for his kids, warmly and genuinely. The player understands from then that when the orphanage is under threat, Kiryu will be fully motivated to protect it, and we can get behind him chasing the conspiracy. The fact that from then on every kid has plot mandatory problems then overcompensates and ironically started having the inverse effect on me caring. I dreaded whenever one of these kids opened their mouths. I do have some positive feelings towards the orphanage, but they are outweighed by the sheer amount of time the orphanage robs from you. It makes the point it wants to long before it's over. So anyway, the good points. A lot of Yakuza 2 was spent challenging Kiryu, demonstrating the downsides to how he conducts himself. His stubbornness, empathy, loyalty, patience, forgiveness, and let's not forget his code of honor made him very easy to manipulate, made him at times a hindrance to his allies. His victories came with caveats, his defeats hurt those around him. The long-term decisions he has made, while well-intentioned in the moment, often wind up short-sighted or naive. Yakuza 3 flips that script and starts building Kiryu up again. This isn't exclusive to the orphanage, but is best demonstrated by it. Those qualities make him a model parent. We see him putting that same effort he put into fighting the Omi, put into making sure his children are healthy and happy. He's able to see eye to eye with and teach his kids lessons both directly and through example. And Kiryu wins over the townsfolk of Okinawa in short order. It's the most light and carefree Yakuza has been in a long while, and when it works, it is a breath of fresh air. Seeing Kiryu show up stuffy parents and corrupt teachers without needing to raise his fists against them is in its own way really cathartic, and it manages to do all of this without making Kiryu perfect or sugar-coatedly saccharine. He flubs things, he oversteps his bounds, and admits to his failings as a way of leading by example. I also don't dislike the kids themselves. They're not painfully blinding rays of sunshine. They bicker, they're selfish, they have their own personalities. They may be a bit across the board all too good-natured, but they are still prone to childish spats. I wouldn't call their troubles by themselves interesting, but they do at least give the writers an excuse to put Kiryu's worldview against really mundane kid troubles, and at time it's a good source of comedy or drama. It's always fun seeing Kiryu approach utter mundanity with his all-or-nothing mentality, and this gives us a lot of that. The ultimate takeaway is this: I would have gladly done all of the orphanage stuff if it was optional sub-stories. As I said, I don't dislike the children, and they should have screen time, but because of how it is framed as part of the plot itself, while never justifying its presence, or ever paying off, or having Kiryu gain a vital insight in the larger plot because of it, I end up resenting the orphanage. Putting that aside, there is more I enjoy in these early beats. The conflict with the Ryudo made for a fun introduction to the series, and I found my appreciation for it had remained but had taken a different form. The lighter tone of the orphanage carries over to the Ryudo, as Rukia, freshly thrashed by Kiryu, escorts him through the arcade to the family offices. Along the way, locals stop to make casual small talk with him, and Kiryu notes how well the Yakuza seem to get on with their racket. Sub-stories focusing on the Ryudo show they have a close, friendly rapport with the locals, who are happy to have them around. Following on from the Nakahara drama and some pesky kid problems, Rukia comes running to beg Kiryu for help, and treating him with an odd amount of reverence.
だからここは兄貴しか収められねえと。
ちょっと待て。
はい？
さっきから聞いていると、俺のことを兄貴兄貴って何言ってるんだ。
まあ、その話はいいとして。
よくない。お前みたいなやつに兄貴と呼ばれたら、うちの子供たちに悪影響だろうが。
別にいいじゃないですか。俺は兄貴の強さと男気に惚れたんです。俺にとって兄貴は兄貴なんです。
Saki, a girl in Nakahara's care, has disappeared. Nakahara is staggering about drunk and is an emotional wreck. He's worried that she went running back to her birth mother who had formerly abandoned the little girl. Kiryu can't convince Nakahara to just go and ask Saki who she would prefer to be with because he's terrified it won't be him. Kiryu then says he'll go and handle it himself, and when Nakahara tries to call him out, Kiryu assures Nakahara this has nothing to do with the eviction. He just can't stand by while a child might be in trouble. Yeah, Kiryu's not just steadfastly good, he's becoming downright angelic by this point, but hey.
別に、サキを連れ戻したところで、それとこれとは話は別だ。今はサキのことだけを考えようじゃないか。
This leads to us tracking Saki down to the Tamashiro family. Kiryu sends Rukia to fetch Nakahara and then stomps the whole family before Rukia can make it back. This includes Tamashiro himself, who serves as a good step up in difficulty. That and I found out where Majima's knives went. Tamashiro had hooked up with Saki's mother, got her to take back Saki, and it was only done so he could get leverage over Nakahara. Tamashiro is a sickening villain and pretty much unites Kiryu and the Ryudo, and his nature reunites Nakahara and Saki.
いつも見守ってくれてありがとう。
Back at the office, Nakahara begs Kiryu to swear an oath of brotherhood. We'd be down a man to witness it were it not for a surprise visit from Daigo, followed by Shoyo Toma, the secretary to Tamiya, the politician pushing for the military base expansion. And we learn that the Tamashiro were a Tojo clan affiliate, meant to oversee land acquisition for the resort deal. Daigo had come down here to investigate supposed use of shady methods, and it seems the matter is resolved. Daigo won't pursue more land if it would hurt Kiryu. Kiryu still jokes to Daigo to at least give him a heads up if the Tojo ever comes gunning for his land.
トーマくんの夢は彼が総理大臣になった時にでもやってもらいましょう。な、トーマくん。その頃はもう桐生さんもいい年になった。今面倒見てる子供さんたちも今の俺くらいの年にはなってますよ。それならいいでしょ
う。俺は結構しぶといぜ。
Okay, the idea of a self-aware Kiryu is terrifying. For the moment, the situation is resolved, but there is still some friction. Nakahara states that preserving Okinawa is more important than money, but Toma disagrees. His time in Tokyo has shown him how insignificant Okinawa really is. At best, we've just won a temporary respite. I have a fondness for this whole opening segment. Accidentally or otherwise, it works well as a jumping in point for the series because besides the improved reminisce features and how the Kamurocho prologue serves as a catch and wrap-up, the Nakahara and Tamashiro conflict is like an entire Yakuza plot in miniature. We have an emotional stake for Kiryu to protect an antagonistic larger family, a few twists and turns, Kiryu going solo against great odds, concluding with a boss fight. Kiryu changed a few lives and made some new friends. It's an appetizer for the main course. Besides this, there's no small amount of schadenfreude in watching these small-town gangsters pick a fight with Kiryu, assured in them being tougher because they have small-town pride, completely unaware of who they're picking a fight with.
どうだ？
なかなか立派な蛇だな。
違うわ、ボケ！蛇じゃねえよ、ハブ！ハブだ、ハブ！
ハブも蛇も同じだろう。
Then Tamashiro as an introductory villain is so unashamedly evil that there is no question as to who gets the shit kicking. Then there's the punchline of it all that no matter how far Kiryu goes, he will inflict GBH on a member of the Tojo clan. We once again jump ahead, back to where we began in March 2009. Nakahara and Daigo have somehow been shot by the same man on the same night, in less time than it should even take to get from one man to the other, barring a really long shot, which the idea of that is a long shot. We have a mystery, and a culprit. With the deed to the orphanage stolen, Haruka asks if Kiryu is going to Kamurocho. When he says he's unsure, she assures him it's okay. Rukia walks in, saying he's coming along. He needs to find the man who shot his boss. Kiryu agrees, and when Rukia leaves, turns and asks Haruka to look after him. Kiryu's going to slip away alone tomorrow, feeling Kamurocho is too hot for the young Yakuza to handle right now. I then went and solved half of Ryukyu's problems before hitting the hay, so I think now is as good a time as any to finally talk about anything besides plot. Yeah, I am introducing Ryukyu on the beat that Kiryu is leaving it. To be fair, it is one of my least favourite hubs, split between a wide open main street with stores and the arcade, and a more cramped red light district. There's less store and it's spread further apart, webbed through a network of cut-throughs, alleyways, and wide open expanses of little interesting. Its red light district is also a rather grey district, and I'm not just talking about the colour scheme. Yakuza 3 saw some of the most extensive cutting when it came to localization in the series, starting with good art and continuing into the game itself. A number of sub-stories got the axe, a number of which are continuations of sub-stories from previous games, and the total minigame count of 20 was thinned to 16, which is still nothing to shake a stick at. The cut minigames, funnily enough, include formerly playable mahjong, shogi, hostess clubs, and massage parlors. So yeah, when I say Hatsumachi is more grey than red, you can see where I'm coming from. All the vice is being squeezed out. Lastly, a new trivia game called Answer X Answer didn't make it. It tests knowledge of Japanese history that, while it wouldn't be impossible for a foreigner to know, is far less likely. I'm going to be far from the first or last to say it's a bastard when content gets cut. Even when I do choose to trust it was a case of cut down or nothing when it is said. They had a deadline to get the game out and had to pick what would be worth spending the man hours translating. At least that's what one account says. So yes, I understand, but I'm still going to be a little shit and point out how funny the wound looks when you look on the edges of what got cut. You can still visit the mahjong and shogi parlors, but besides optional dialogue and locker keys, they serve no purpose. Hey guys, can I join in, please? I mean, I gave you new lives. Okay, let's discuss the term optional. Another account goes that these games were removed to make it more palatable and less challenging for the West. In Yakuza 2, I never had to touch either mahjong or shogi. At one point I was threatened with a round of shogi, but I could pay to ignore it, and I'll admit again that I did. I am abysmal at shogi. And I said last time I would learn these two games one day, but it clearly won't be today. As for the hostess content, they are now just girls you date. You pick them up, mostly from burger joints, go and play a couple of minigames, and then you walk to a love hotel. There's a tiny sub-story attached as well. All of the items surrounding hostesses meant to boost charisma or act as gifts still exist within the game but serve no function. They are mechanically neutered. The reasons given are a mix of deadlines and compatibility with Western taste. History speaks for itself nowadays. People pushed back, and later games that did get released have been far more feature complete. So as I said, I will hardly be the first to call bullshit on it. And I accept deadlines as a reason quite readily. I am not so on board with the rather patronizing argument of Western tastes. And with that in mind, once again continuing to be a little shit, if we are removing for tastes, the new East Asian games found in Koikoi, Oichokabu, and Silo, well, I found the two card games to not be intimidating, at least as foreign elements. I found them just as intimidating as Texas Hold'em for the simpler and more all-encompassing reason that I'm bad at card games, but I would never remove card games from Yakuza because I'm bad at them. Silo is just tossing dice in a bowl. I can wrap my head around that. I wrapped my head around it when it was underground. So yeah, I can't claim I as of yet know how to play Oichokabu, Koikoi. After Mahjong and Shogi, I appreciate that yet more games we in the West don't often see get a chance to shine. If I like what I'm seeing, I may sit down and learn. And these never gate my narrative progress. I can go through the entire game never knowing it even exists. And you know what? Speaking of narratives, if they were in a sub-story, I might even find extra motivation to dig in and learn. This is the best of both worlds. You don't gate an unmotivated player from true plot progression, but for players who do care and do like a story to motivate their actions, this gives them that. A little bit of sugar does help the medicine go down. Like, for instance, the fishing minigame. It's a different kettle of fish from a card game, but at first I wasn't enjoying it. I was having a hard time understanding its rhythm, and the eye strain it brought on was hampering me a bit. But a sub-story to replace an expensive fish for another tasks the player with catching one of the toughest catches present or forking over a lot of money, some of which I was loaned. So, I sat down and learned. I had extrinsic and intrinsic reason to do so. I wanted a man to get his damn fish. Tender or tuna, I'd rather hold on to the money.
よーし
Then I offered to return it anyway, but I didn't have to. I then kept fishing for a little while thereafter. It's a really non-stop minigame, a constant battle of man versus nature that strained my eyes as I had to maintain focus on attention gauge, the fish's direction, and never let up. It's more intense than the final boss, I'll say that. It didn't hurt that it was also a good money spinner. Yakuza as a series can serve as a good way to package bits of Japanese culture, gamify them a little, tie them into stories, and make them less intimidating. For people from the country, I imagine it's nice having a game that shows these parts of life and plays them up a little. For foreigners like myself, it's a good little way to learn about an activity or subculture I won't run into at home. I haven't seen a single mahjong parlor about. It sure beats the Getaway, where the only British activity I can remember was putting roses by the roadside. So, besides what was mentioned, what else is new? Karaoke is one of the most bizarre aspects of the series. They get the voice actors to actually perform their songs, they glitz it up, give them imaginative stages and set pieces for these song excerpts. It doesn't hurt that Kiryu's VA is the singer of his own rock band, Takaya Kuroda and Goodfellas. So if you want to hear the man sing more, there you go, it's worth it. But as a game, I hate it at worst and just kinda don't care at best. As a spectacle, a joke, a song selection, or a way to demonstrate the bizarre tone and otherness of Yakuza, I adore it. It's a simple 4-button rhythm game. The screen is cluttered and the UI tacky, emulating those karaoke systems with their kitschy graphics and displays, I suppose. The rhythm for hitting buttons is fine, but how they're laid out in rows with varying speeds, with some notes popped right at the start of lines, it's just frustrating and disorienting to play. And the song choice in Yakuza 3 is utterly unremarkable. I can only remember Kamurocho Lullaby, and only because it feels like a dry run for Bakami Tai, a sappy sad song where a character gets to overact their melancholy. But it doesn't land. Not yet anyway. To make sure I leave the viewers here with some joy, here's Kiryu cheering on Haruka. We also got pool, and I like Q Sports, and we have 3 rule sets, 8-ball, 9-ball, and rotation. It's a good suite bolstered by the addition of physics. I mean, yeah, every game has had physics, but this has got those PS3 physics. Physics that let a bike hit the stratosphere when the collision panics. Pub games are also joined by darts, and once again there are several rule sets. I think there are 2 kinds of darts minigames in existence, Wobbly Crosshair and Armor Log. Wobbly Crosshair is about as easy as it comes. Armor Log, on the other hand, my brain has never been able to really understand or accept. Aiming with one analog and simulating the arc of the throw with the other. I have no idea why I'm so terrible at these. I mean, I know in the footage Kiryu and I are drunk, but still. It's there, again, it's purely optional. Later games will have celebrity cameos with darts, funnily enough. And going back to physics for a second, UFO catchers are a lot worse now. It's so realistic. And while we're at the arcade, we also got a brand new cabinet. Goodbye to YF6, hello Boxelios. It's a totally unique, made for Yakuza 3 arcade cabinet. Far less jank too. A shoot 'em up test of speed and enemy recognition. You have to kill singular enemies quick by finding and angling shots to their weak point as they writhe and dodge just by being weird monstrosities. You're fighting against a strict time limit and every kill buys you scant seconds. It's fast, frenetic, unique, and exists solely in Yakuza 3. Even with the cut content, there is a lot on offer. I said Ryukyu was one of my least favourite hubs. I find it a bland locale, too big and spacious for its needs, lacking in a good deal of character and segmented in a way to make it annoying to avoid encounters you don't want. This is also the first time in the main series we have a follow camera in free roam, and after the short time spent in Kamurocho, being able to see the city up close on Kiryu's level, rather than as a CCTV camera, we're shuttled off to a place which is where I believe old people go to die. I don't actually know anything about Ryukyu, that's just the vibe. We're also now equipped with a first-person camera that allows us to immerse ourselves in the telephoto lens that is Kiryu's vision. The first-person camera misses the mark because it has mechanics tied to it. Where it would be better served as a tool used purely to feel closer to the setting, now there are locker keys and events that require the use of first-person to trigger. It retroactively makes a collectible more annoying, and another character gives you a new way to unlock attacks that requires looking at events in this way, even though I really could just walk up to them. I'm just not allowed to trigger them in other ways. It tries to give itself reason to exist when just being a feature was enough. Phone boxes can now be used to shuffle items around, so now safe houses really only exist to recover health, go over stats, and reminisce. For now, let's talk about the real measure of a place: sub-stories. While there are some standouts along with a general ethos of the Ryukyu sub-stories, I want to start with a bit of a blanket statement. For the most part, it's Yakuza 2's lengthier stories mixed with 1's lack of character. I know it's an odd way to put it, Yakuza 1's are a bit bland because the series was finding its feet. Yakuza 2 upped the length while putting that length to good use. It also had the benefit of surprise, which Yakuza 3 just can't have again. The Ryukyu sub-stories are generally a lot gentler than Kamurocho or Sotenbori. We still deal with crime, a human trafficking ring and a man stuck in deep with loan sharks, yet they still resolve very cleanly. Other times the sub-stories up the seaside holiday nature of the town. We're helping a dad carry ice cream one second and helping the fishmonger the next. Along with the orphanage, the sub-stories give Ryukyu a peaceful idealism that back up what Kiryu is fighting to maintain. My favourite sub-story Ryukyu offers comes in the form of a series. It's genuinely a funny setup for a story that I don't think would work in any other hub. The Seven Mysteries of Ryukyu follows Kiryu as he repeatedly overhears schoolgirl Haruko and her friends discussing and falling victim to scams and urban legends. From a shut-down, ultra-healthy juice shop to an accessory meant to increase your luck in love. Every single time, Kiryu decides to investigate and find the utterly banal explanation behind these stories. It culminates with the girls creating their own urban legend and Kiryu plays a part. Not that the girls know, they never cross paths. It's just a really funny mental image, the grizzled old Yakuza who takes on rumors spread by schoolgirls at face value and never sharing the answers. That relaxed slice-of-life nature encapsulates a lot of Ryukyu and is one of the benefits and drawbacks of what the place represents. It's hard to sell the idea of a nice, peaceful neighborhood in your gritty crime drama, especially with the amount of time it asks for. Sub-stories with good people and relaxed narratives humanized and grounded Kamurocho and Sotenbori, reminding you this isn't just a city full of organized crime, but a place people live and work. Ryukyu doesn't benefit in the same way, it just makes me think, this place is dead. I'd rather be out getting wasted and playing patchy slots. Which I also can't do now. Volcano isn't erupting. Wait, shit, I gotta get to Kamurocho! We cut to a series of what are essentially boss introductions. Our three new Tojo head honchos get calls from Kashiwagi for a meeting. We have the stoic rich boy Yoshitaka Mine training in his office, the brutal Go Hamazaki extorting a Chinese restaurant, and taking resistance poorly, and giant sex pervert Tsuyoshi Kanda. Just so you know, he's the new head of the Nishiki family. I know Nishiki did bad, but I think what the Tojo does to his memory is in bad taste. As Mine drives to headquarters, he gets a call from an excited Kanda. He demands 1 billion yen. Celebrations are in order. The war for the chairman position is coming.
兄貴、6代目はまだご存命だ。その話をするのは早いでしょ。
Fantastic point, Mine. It's almost as if Kanda doesn't care. It's almost as if no one but you and Kashiwagi care. The Tojo is at its most embarrassing yet. Daigo has been shot, he's not dead, and a war is already bubbling to take his currently occupied spot. At the meeting, Kashiwagi, one of the few remaining members of the old guard and, well, one respectable person in the room talking, tries to hold this absolute shambles of a clan to some form of order. They flip-flop between yelling about avenging their chairman, going on the warpath to find the Fuma lookalike, and taking the boss's place themselves. It's all snide accusations about who can be next chairman. Mine and Kashiwagi have a sensible solution at least, unify the clan under Kiryu as interim chairman, which is flatly rejected by Kanda, who says his men would kill him on sight for what he did to the Nishiki family. As though he actually cares about Nishiki or Shindo rather than his own power play. Still, it's clear when Kiryu pops his head up there'll be people waiting to lop it off. And then it's revealed the one man who rarely keeps silent seems to be stunned at how absurdly fucking awful his cohorts are. All our man Majima can do is tell them to kill each other on their own time.
喧嘩すんのは結構やが、もしうちの島に入ってきたら、 そん時は怪我するだけじゃ済まへんで。
Kiryu arrives in Kamurocho and quickly finds himself halting a Nishiki family takeover of Stardust. The money Mine gave to Kanda is being used as a bribe, and when money fails, violence soon follows. Considering Kiryu just walked into the room, that was hardly intelligent. Oh shit, they're playing intelligence for violence. Okay, I gotta talk about combat. At its core, the basic combat is further refinement. A slightly slower pace, a tightened up lock-on, bosses are now more susceptible to punishment and can be played a bit more aggressively. I'll talk more about that with upgrades. Let's talk additions and big changes. The most notable tweak is the introduction of Red Heat, a secondary more powerful form of heat appended to the end of the standard heat bar. It mostly just adds on to what I talked about last time, which can be boiled down to this. It's good to stay in heat mode to gain passive bonuses, and you cash in heat, losing those bonuses to get a burst of guaranteed damage with a fun, powerful animation. Red Heat moves are now gated at the top of the bar and tend to be harder to set up, and for the extra damage they do, they aren't actually that impressive. They tend to be flashier and more brutal, but they're only marginally better. One area that has seen real expansion is in weapon use. In Yakuza 1, Swords got an upgraded moveset, Yakuza 2 did the same for staves, Kenzan and 3 add knuckles, Kali sticks, tonfas, and nunchucks to that list. Along with that is a bindable weapon quick select, cutting down on menu fiddling to make weapons less cumbersome to equip. Not needing to pause to pull out a weapon and putting it at a player's beck and call means it's now far more casual a decision. It encourages use by making it so that pulling out a weapon isn't seen as a break in the action but a beat within it. There is with this a greater focus on purchasing weapons and defensive gear, along with a whole crafting system, which drip feeds recipes and gives you items to hunt to create a deadlier arsenal of weapons with high damage and status effects. Along with this, Kamiyama will repair broken gear and reload firearms. All this encouragement is hurt by the economy of it all. Weapons are a luxury. If you want to mod gear, it's a money sinkhole. Durable gear will have 50 to 100 hits in them, which is far less impressive than it sounds, especially with moves like this. Kiryu is hardly conservative with his gear. The prices of repair are then pretty extortionate. In a lot of cases, fisticuffs are on equal footing with weapons until you get real high tier stuff. They also carry new movesets that you have to start learning with low durability gear that then takes more money to repair. About the best thing a lot of these weapons offer is being able to instantly pull out a heat move. Which brings me to another issue I have. This is another one of those complaints that I find minor, but I'm going to air it now as it will be an issue that not only remains but gets more present as the series goes on. This is the first entry where I really feel it. The variety of heat moves has expanded considerably. They've gotten requirements that are more esoteric and odd alongside ones that become omnipresent possibilities. Some will likely only be done once if you're trying to tick off 100% completion, since their requirements for being triggered won't come up naturally barring a lot of luck. That is fine, they're flashy and fun, often funny, and there are plenty of practical heat moves simple to understand and execute that make up your bread and butter. And now there are moves that toss you into a bakery. Heat moves have always had a cost besides draining the bar. They ask you to expend a resource or risk the time setting them up. Slamming someone into a wall, one of the easiest, still often means you have to get them there. Using a weapon breaks it or costs durability. Heat moves are contextual, and fulfilling that context is their challenge. Yakuza 3 starts introducing moves that don't have risk or cost. While it takes some unlocking, you start gaining heat moves where the setup is just having a grappled foe in red heat, hardly a challenge. The most explicit one is pulling a defensive roll towards them, which comes with no risk. You are zooming towards an enemy, but you are loaded with iframes and are likely mashing triangle confident that it will trigger. And if it doesn't, you can simply dodge back away. You can go from 0 to 60 at a man's nuts in no time flat. Later games vary back and forth on this, but we will start seeing moves that you can just trigger at will for a lot of the game time, and my complaint is that while it's a slight simplification, it's a slight simplification that encourages less thought and lessens how meaningful it is to observe and use your environment. This is less a complaint. Besides this, it's also the point where not only the execution but the moves themselves get sillier. You unlock a move to start smoking during a battle. That's a fantastic move, that has risk and payoff, and it's funny. Behind the amusing image is a move that has wind-up. Then there's this. You need to be drunk to do it, and it sobers you up. It has a unique cap, and it ties attacks to systems outside of the combat. Putting all of this aside, I love the fact that by now Kiryu is so flexible. No matter what place or position he is put into, he can turn the tables and start pummeling the shit out of people. Let's talk about parries. Each game has had them, and in Yakuza 1 I called them finicky and imprecise. They were still present in Yakuza 2 if awkward to unlock. It's in Yakuza 3 I can start appreciating them. They are able to be unlocked shortly after Kiryu returns to Kamurocho, and I consider them core to Kiryu's moveset. Now they felt a lot more consistent. When one of them flubbed, it's because I flubbed them. They're hard to pull off, but fair. They're cleverly balanced. Kiryu has 4 parries that each have different levels of risk and payoff. After recovering Ryu Gujo, thankfully no longer a labyrinth, Kamaki rolls up and helps Kiryu limber up and even learn some new moves. While I complain that Yakuza 2, for all its combat improvements, had bosses that were battles of whittling down, Yakuza 3 starts off letting you get more aggressive and properly punish bosses in their wind downs and whiffs. And as you gain your collection of parries, you can start actually fighting the bosses in a proper back and forth slugfest. It rewards learning a boss's moveset. It started making me think more about spacing, finding a good range that I can bait a boss's moves out while still having a comfortable window to counter. The knockback does minimal damage and grants no great bonuses. It's bound to triangle whilst blocking, which means you can mash it to guarantee it will trigger. You'll maybe force an opening. It carries the same level of risk as a standard block in this regard. A heavy hit that would break your block will take your counter with it, but a broken block is just a broken block. It's a safe move that gains little. If you're lucky, wonky physics will pivot you behind an enemy for a combo. The Kamaki Fist Reversal asks you not to lock on, and it's a heat move, but it has an exceptionally large window and works in all directions. It's low risk, low cost, and does reasonable damage. The parry and tiger drop require you to hit either grapple as a punch attack is being made, or heavy attack at the moment a hit connects. Now that these moves exist on top of a solid combat system, I do find them to be cleverly designed for their simplicity. Both of them are bound on top of slow, heavily dedicated buttons. You mistime it and Kiryu will do a relatively long move that leaves you open and vulnerable. Your punishment for mistiming or panicking is what the buttons usually do. The parry can combo into a decently damaging and very rewarding heat move. This heat move is asking you to gamble your red heat on landing a parry. It's rewarding just as a way of putting a cherry on top of a parry. I am in a weird position of believing Yakuza's combat doesn't get enough credit, but at the same time understanding why. I don't believe it's deep, but I would call it expansive, and in a series that wants the combat to feel punchy and cathartic, that is a valid approach. But it's still a far cry from Thoughtless if you want to get the most out of it. Want to revel in feeling big and powerful? Here's a ton of ways to bring the pain, and there's a lot more to learn. But you could beat Yakuza never engaging with any of these systems, never engaging with the parries. But if you do, you get another tool in your arsenal, and well... that's fucking cathartic. The fact that Yakuza has new moves as hidden collectibles in books you buy from traders and unlocked through good old level up systems brings its own drawbacks and bonuses. When you have an open world RPG of collectibles, you'd want the collectibles to be meaningful. And what's better than new ways to attack? In a brawler, options are about as good as it gets. Yakuza 3 expands on the trainers in creative ways. A weapons trainer arrives in Okinawa to teach you new movesets and give you weapon licenses for Kamiyama's services. As noted, Kamaki reteaches you several of his old moves before expanding your arsenal. And goodbye YF6! Say hello to Inner Fighter 7, a giant experimental VR gaming machine that needs a strong-willed person to test, ran by a guy who looks like Doc Brown in something that is sillier than the Baby Mission, while also managing to be somehow more understated about it. I really do love IF7's conceit, actually. In it, Kiryu re-experiences boss fights. His health in the machine is based on his spirit level up, which boosts heat, not health. And you have to replay these bosses under a time limit with less health and no heat moves. It tests pure mechanical skill and culminates in a mirror match against Kiryu. As a way to learn new attacks, it makes you earn them with a fun frame. We also get revelations. Mac the photographer tells Kiryu to see things deeper because Mac wants the perfect shot, meanwhile Kiryu sees everything as a new way to fight. It's a QTE followed by a rather annoying question, asking to put into words what Kiryu learned so he can have, you guessed it, a revelation. I understand it's not meant to be obvious what to pick, but then what am I to intuit? I most often go towards the tone that sounds like a reasonable fighting technique, reasonable for Kiryu at least. And since that may well not be it, I have no place to begin to guess. Then we get the real reward, which is seeing Kiryu run a blog, talking about the mundanity and insanity of life, knowing that what it really means is, so yeah, I figured out a new way to break spines. Also respect that he advertises himself as the Dragon of Dojima. While I consider the parries fundamental to how I play the game, nothing that is unlocked changes the combat totally because it never could. The game has to account for someone who is beelining the story, and the only new moves they may even see are the ones they get from leveling up. And points earned just from the story would be nowhere near enough to fill that out. I was doing extra content and sub-stories, and I didn't max out the level up gauge. The benefits of this is that it allows a player to fully immerse themselves in their new list. As new moves are earned, you have plenty of time to internalize and learn them. Those you like will stick around. Those that don't quite stick, you will probably at least know of. New moves are easy to digest and tend to be earned in memorable ways. After Kiryu defeats himself, his final unlock from Inner Fighter 7 is a move that allows him to trade heat for a burst of health. It's appropriate, it's sort of cool, it's sort of funny. It also sucks. I remember it purely because of how I got it, and I can't show me using it right now because the one time I used it were big spoilers. The drawback is one of those handicaps I feel I had to mention, but I don't hold much ill for myself. It's a necessary weakness to have a large moveset to give us new things to do in a series like this. And many games, even those that do have deep, multi-layered mechanics where it's easy to see a newbie from a master just from watching gameplay, will allow a player to get through the core experience just by showing a solid grasp and making use of the basics. Mastery is for those who want it. It's your own reward. Yakuza, while not known as a game of skill mastery, is the same way. Mastery of these mechanics is for those who want it. It's why the most dangerous moves and the most dangerous enemies are kept to the sidelines as optional obstacles far removed from the main plot. Arase from the first game can be found in 4, and he is a monster of a fight, which means Kiryu was guzzling the stuff. This former embarrassed member of the Tojo could now wipe the floor with every currently embarrassing member of the Tojo. If you want to master Yakuza, you have to go out of your way to do so. When it comes to the main plot, you benefit from exploring the fringes, but it will never make or break you. One area that is genuinely hurt by the unlocks, however, is in the modified Feel the Heat mechanic. Now you pick from 3 options, and a lot of the early game, perhaps throughout the entire run if you don't go and unlock the others, you'll be giving every boss a headbutt. Before I move on from combat, I want to thank Neo Kobe Pizza for correcting an issue I had in Yakuza 2 in regards to random encounters stopping happening. It turns out that at that point I had to find an encounter boss. I really didn't pick up on that. Yakuza 3 doesn't keep this system so far as I'm aware. The random encounters never stopped. And yeah, now they start with QTEs sometimes, but there's no real meaningful difference. There is a lot to the sidelines in Yakuza as a whole. This is Joe-Amon, and this is not my footage. Joe-Amon is the real final boss of each game, joined by his brothers in Yakuza 2 onwards. I have never gotten the completion rating to face him, and for the sake of honesty in these videos, I likely never will. In my own downtime, I doubt I have the patience. While I enjoy Yakuza, endeavoring for 100%, particularly in this series, would be the worst of busy work and more than likely kill my enthusiasm. I play games like I eat fruit. I'm there for the good bits. I ain't eating the rind. You have a handy completion screen to let you easily in on what needs doing and how, the amount of chips you need to win in games of chance, your ranking on each karaoke song, marking off every heat move, and perhaps the worst, eating every food at every diner. You can only order one at a time. You need to have any amount of damage to eat, no eating when full, and you have to cross-reference menus to make sure you've got everything or have a list handy. This means if you want to follow this path, you are going to be grinding meals, going out and getting hurt, and running back for one morsel more on these really expansive menus. I'm bringing it to the table now because later games in the series really try and work out ways to make food completion less painful. Introducing drinks that hurt you so you can keep stuffing your gob. Adding a way to double your health bar. Trust me, I'm going to talk about that in 5. And in 6, they add a secondary hunger mechanic alongside refilling health. The Yakuza series, for all of its minor iteration, has to iterate on the act of fine dining. It feels like just dodging the question of whether eating all of these foods, which until 6 don't really have many differing effects beyond health and somewhat in 5. It's just plain busy work before then. It doesn't prove anything more about how much you've completed the game more than gating Joe-Amon behind toggling everything at least once in the options menu. I always play games to the point of satisfaction, and for these videos, I try to have as much knowledge as I need on as much as is important to break things down. 100% completion isn't for me, that's an admitted lack of my own patience. I'm not condemning people who do go for 100%, that would be stupid of me to judge people's investment and persistence because I lack it, but I do find the lengths it goes to bizarrely arbitrary in some areas. In another thing to get the noggin jogging, let's get back to the plot momentarily. At Stardust, Kazuki lets Kiryu know how the Tojo has changed. The Nishiki family under Kanda have taken over Fuma protection rackets, and the Fuma family are going to take back what's rightfully theirs. Kashiwagi, head of the Fuma family, has to sit by and try not to make a spark, because really the whole clan is a powder keg. When Kiryu arrived at Stardust, they were paying to use it as HQ for the upcoming clash. Kiryu then gets a call from Kashiwagi. He wants to meet, and Kiryu is all too happy to learn what the hell is going on. There is a danger. Cops are out in droves around the Millennium Tower. We have to take the long way around. And we're also warned of strange characters about town, foreign men dressed in black, out on the hunt for Daigo. Men like these men. Oh hey, I recognize. Kiryu runs them off, and when he notices another foreigner, he gives chase. Only to find out it's... oh, Mac. Another new addition is chase battles. They are incredibly easy, but I find them highly enjoyable and really underserved. They turn Kamurocho and Okinawa into obstacle courses. The crowds that are usually set dressing or invisible walls for fights become physical barriers you have to navigate. All it takes is a simple addition of a sprint button and adding some heft to Kiryu's turning to finalize why these little chase moments are so enjoyable yet so simple. You close in, cut corners, sharp turn, and repeatedly shoulder barge your quarry until they stop running. Inversely, you could be the chasee. I don't know why I enjoy foot chases in games so much so that even simplistic versions of it are quick ways to please me. As I mentioned in the last part, once again, the hardest chases are optional, and serve to boost your stats to make the chases that were already easier than these ones, easier. Also, we get running lessons from Mac, the guy we just caught, so yeah, he's not an expert. He asks us to go see somewhere cool. Kiryu seems up for delaying the plot, but then Mac gets a call and has to head off. Alright, sure. Kids, follow Mac's example. Kiryu makes it to Kashiwagi and is told about that absolute shambles of a meeting, and some suspicions are aired. Kashiwagi is convinced that someone in the clan is still pushing for the resort deal behind Daigo's back, and right now he's hidden away and Kashiwagi is one of the few to know his location, and considering his underlings, yeah, wise. Kiryu presents his image of Daigo and Nakahara's assailant to Kashiwagi, and he asks an important question. How did the same man shoot these two within 2.5 hours? The time of a flight between Tokyo and Okinawa itself.
どうやったって空港から登場会に来る時間はないんだが。
これは
停電か。
柏木さん。柏木さん。
桐生。この男。この男とつながってるやつを探し出せ。そいつは登場会に。
登場会内部の人間ですか。
そいつを探し出せ。いいな。
はい。
I said it would take more than the bombing to stop him. Kiryu, despite being the strongest Yakuza to ever live, once again demonstrates that he's a really shit criminal, as he exits the Millennium Tower, coated in Kashiwagi's blood. Seemingly surprised when the cops have questions about that, he flees down a straight line, stops in view of the cops, and I can't say he's really spotted as, well, he's already spotted. So they spot him. And Kiryu has his second sprint of the night, fleeing the cops until he lucks into Date.
久々に一杯引っ掛けねえか。
Date and Kiryu head to New Serena. Date has quit the force as mentioned and become a journalist. A pretty dedicated ink raker at that. He's even pushing around his boss for leads. So we get a gigantic info dump on the new Tojo top dogs. The two decide that between these three and Majima, one of them has to be the resort deal conspirator. Hamazaki built his outfit out of Yokohama following Kiryu trashing the Snake Flower Triad. Kanda recently got out of jail following a sexual assault charge and built his standing on violence. And Mine, already a successful businessman, bribed Kanda to get him a seat at the table. He is now, as we know, keeping the Tojo afloat with his own wealth. And between those three, Date and Kiryu decide that Kanda was the most likely to have ordered that hit. I have my doubts, but in a bizarre dramatic irony, I know Kanda better than Kiryu, and thus know it's a bit of a waste of time. I'll come back around and talk about Kanda though, and well, this scene, because we're about to get interrupted. Rukia followed us down here and is a bit lost. We faff around a bit finding him, and in a bit of luck, we find him picking a fight with Nishiki family thugs trying to kidnap a woman for their boss. So we track down the hotel he's celebrating in, and while he proves to be a slippery fucker, Kiryu manages to beat him down. And after a brief chat, Kiryu realizes Kanda can't be the one.
今回の一件こんな単純なやつが書けるようなもんじゃない多分こいつは
Kanda dealt with, we have the option of showing Rukia about town. With that, let's talk about some of the odder sub-stories and their beats in Yakuza 3. A lot of my general issues with Ryukyu sub-stories are still intact, but this is alongside some standout exceptions and curios. If you hang out with Rukia the whole evening, ignoring the game asking you several times if you want to call it quits, especially because one of these meetings is a cash sink, it ends with Rukia wanting to see the roof of the Millennium Tower. It is this which reminds Kiryu, and probably the audience, that Kashiwagi died only earlier that night. Rukia realizes what happened, and instead offers that they go and toast his memory in the park. It's a heartfelt but oddly placed beat. Kashiwagi is a character that's far more important to Kiryu than the player. Kiryu has known him since he was a teenager, if not earlier, and Kashiwagi was always his superior within the Tojo, and from the time Kiryu left, he's been a trusted contact within the Fuma family. It's only now, after his death, that Kiryu reflects on the kind of man he was. It makes it odd that we pick the dialogue option, shaping the more casual personality of this up until now important side character. I said he likes cold noodles. Something that does come back around in Yakuza 0. This scene is completely optional. It can be avoided rather easily. If you dislike Rukia, Kiryu forgets about Kashiwagi. If you avoid this and some other side content, that helicopter blew Kashiwagi out of existence nigh completely. We later learn of the Honest Living Association, a group Kashiwagi had to fight to create and keep going. Its job is to help Yakuza who want out of the life reintegrate into society, helping them find work and putting their past behind them. Yeah, it turns out Kashiwagi was an absolute saint. Kiryu is brought into the fold by their new leader following Kashiwagi's passing. A group called the Avengers, made up of former spurned Yakuza, are hunting and killing Tojo and HLA for basically not existing when they needed them. Kiryu beats each of them down, tells them it's not too late to get their help now, and they agree to it. It's a boss rush side quest that goes on and on and on. After the gameplay modifying stories of Adam and Marietta, the HLA is definitely Yakuza playing it safe. It's more fighting, using recycled weapon and boss movesets. It drip feeds new fights chapter by chapter to drag it out to the end game, and make sure you just don't end up absolutely loaded down with cash before the halfway mark. I am mostly impressed by how each and every Avengers member gets a somewhat unique character and story, how they got into and out of the life, often by betrayal, some more comedic, some more sympathetic, and then at the end, they refuse to play shogi with me. Rukia's travels in Kamurocho deserve some mention as well. There are points in the story where we can take him about town. We can take him to Utabori and there's a conflict over whether the old man will finish his tattoo. Rukia has a hang-up that his old tattooist died, and until he met Kiryu, he felt he could never find an artist who understood Okinawa enough to rightfully finish it. Utabori may not understand Okinawa, but he knows the meaning of a tattoo and the measure of a man. He refuses to finish it for a few reasons.
行きましょう兄貴。バカの相手をしてる暇はないですし。
ああ、そうだな。
Then he sees Rukia show a thug some mercy, say he's not worth beating down, and that endears him enough that he agrees to finish his tattoo. Another is Rukia getting scammed by a childhood friend of his, now a stripper in Kamurocho. She uses him to pay off debts and chase off seeming suitors. Rukia jumps in front of an army of loan sharks for her. Kiryu tried to tell him that something was off, but Rukia didn't listen. He reveals he knew he was being lied to all along, but played to her tune, and she agrees to go back home to Okinawa at his insistence. I'll delve properly into Rukia and his arc later, but these sub-stories do a good job establishing his character, showing his bluntness, naivety, and hot-headedness. There are two more sub-stories I want to mention before we get back to the plot. The murder at Cafe Alps is one of the most memorable for reasons good and bad. It integrates the menus into the story, letting you use a character chart for the list of people relevant to the case, while tying it to the game's day-night cycle, which I'm not a fan of. It meant that I had to wait several chapters for it to be nighttime and in the right city before I could even start the investigation proper. I got excited to then do some crime busting. Following the notebook given to us by Kid, Date's boss, I went around interviewing everyone. But then the quest does boil down to a very spelled out whodunit where you genuinely cannot fail. I was more impressed by the lengths the game went to in presenting the case than what I could actually do building it. Once you've interviewed everyone and brought new evidence to light, you are not allowed to present incorrect evidence and flub the mystery. This becomes a little disappointing in contrast to our next quest, which while a lot quicker, is a lot more mechanically complex. Kiryu has to stand in for an action star to film a climactic fight scene. We're given instructions, our dialogue, and our battle cues. What to do and in what order. You can follow it to the letter, but Kiryu's acting will be wooden, go somewhat in between on the dialogue and punch it up, or disastrously flub. And that affects how we are rewarded. Then we end on one of the funniest penny drops of Yakuza 3.
お疲れ様です。
おう。
桐生ちゃんなら絶対に大スターになれるぜ。眼力もすごいけど背中からもオーラを感じる。うん、そう思うだろ。
お疲れ様です。はい、そうですね。
どこのプロダクションにも入ってないならうちの映画会社の専属になったよ。みんなもそれがいいと思うだろ。よくないです。なんなんだよ。全員揃って。
すまんな。俺も映画には興味がない。これで失礼させてもらう。
はい、お勤めご苦労様。はい、いや、ご出演お疲れ様でした。お疲れ様でした。
なんなんだよ。一体。
It remixes the combat without changing a thing, asking you to do things in specific order in specific ways, puts stress on the situation in a really fascinating way. I would love a whole game built around action scene choreography. Give me Stuntman for fighting. The rigidity of the Cafe Alps murder becomes disappointing in a series where sub-stories can be failed or only partially succeeded. It's a story that asks for the highest level of engagement, recalling facts and testimonies. This will hurt an inattentive player. It doesn't even need to be complex failure states. A strike system where the player only gets so many mistakes before failure is met would be perfectly adequate. Just give the player lesser or no rewards for failing through. The quest even ends with someone revealing they had suspicions all along but didn't want to say anything. There is a safety net in the story for this quest to still end on. I enjoyed Cafe Alps for its writing, reveals and so on, but on a mechanical level, it's toothless. And the irony is, if you play it perfectly, you would never know. Finally, that's out the way. I can just talk about what the hell the story is in Yakuza 3 and what it means. Considered one of the most confusing, but I would just call it long-winded, and that's me saying it. This is where I really go into spoilers with reckless abandon. I'm going to synopsize it up to the conclusion, then go back and zoom in where appropriate. I want everyone primed for what I'm talking about. If you already know, skip ahead. As I said, there's an index in the description. With Kanda beaten, we learn the military base expansion is going ahead, and since it became a package deal, that means the resort will be constructed as well. Date gets a tip-off of Majima's supposed involvement. Kiryu heads to Purgatory to learn the truth of the matter. He finds Majima, knife returned, and after a fight for the truth, we learn he hasn't used it to stab Kiryu in the back. Majima reveals that Hamazaki introduced him to Suzuki, the politician pushing for the resort deal. When Daigo washed his hands at a deal, Hamazaki kept going, and now he's leaked that photograph to throw Kiryu off. Hamazaki has ample motive as well. He wants Kamurocho and the chairman position. If he has sway in the resort deal, he would then have people he could sell it off to within the triad. It's then that Lao Kalong rolls up with the Snake Flower triad, kidnaps Rukia, and tries to get revenge on Kiryu. We fight our way across town to settle the score once again. Don't come back!
あのどこは死んだはずでは。
Yeah, really, don't come back.
おやっさ、どうして大悟中原を撃ったんだ。
優が桐生一馬か。
ああ。
Beautiful eyes.
え
Like I heard from my brother before.
So Rukia is in shock, nearly executed only to be saved by the man who shot Nakahara, and we have one half of the big mystery right there. That is Fuma's previously unmentioned brother. Kiryu demands Rukia return to Okinawa, as he thought things are too hot in the city right now and someone ought to be watching the kids.
はい。
Later, meeting with Majima and the gang, Mine approaches with an apology in the form of Kanda's severed head. And with this, we get a cutscene that really does sum up about 3 future series villains.
成り上がりの分際で
あなたに一つ言ってなかったことがあります。私、こう見えても結構強いんですよ。
Kanda's explosive rage, his attempts to keep pushing Mine around fall absolutely flat. Hamazaki too is gone. He was last in China and is currently missing. His family is dead, and there is little guessing as to why. Mine says he's holding a meeting. He'll try and smooth things over and stop a full-blown war with the Chinese.
それに、桐生さん、こういう事態を招いた責任、あなたにもあるんじゃないですか?
Kiryu is then contacted by Defense Minister Tamiya, the politician pushing for the military base expansion. This is about where the plot of the game goes 8 kinds of ape shit, but it manages to do it sitting down. Date and Kiryu have a half-hour-long meeting with the man, where he explains what's going on behind the curtain. He's not pushing for the base expansion bill because he wants a big political win to become Prime Minister. As a matter of fact, at this point what happens to the bill hardly matters. He needed the bill to appear real. So the resort bill became opposition and eventually packaged to it. So now both need to keep going ahead, because with this base expansion comes details of a non-existent experimental weapon. This whole thing is a ruse, working in conjunction with the CIA to pull Black Monday, an international arms smuggling ring, out into the open and arrest its leader, Andre Richardson. Fuma's brother is Joji Fuma. He left for America and joined the CIA. Him and Tamiya are best friends going way back. And Joji is currently on his way to Okinawa to kill Toma, the man we met in Okinawa a year ago. Toma left Tamiya's service 2 weeks earlier when he learned the truth of the bills. He's now working with Mine in the Tojo to ensure the resort deal goes ahead, armed with secrets from working with Tamiya that would make him a valuable asset. Toma, being an Okinawan, saw the resort deal as something that could bolster his hometown. He was willing to betray Tamiya's trust to make sure it goes ahead. So Tamiya wants us to fly out to Okinawa and stop Joji assassinating him, for the purely noble reason of not wanting a promising, driven young politician to be snuffed out. He stands by his men, come what may. Date is doubtful, but Kiryu insists Tamiya is genuine in his conviction. Should we save Toma, Tamiya promises that Kiryu's orphanage won't be threatened, which was pretty much Kiryu's only condition. Outside is an army of Suzuki's men. Kiryu sends Date out the back and fights them off, saved by Majima coming in with a truck.
ここだ。
おお、よかった。てっきり引き殺してしもうたかと思ったわ。
He then flies out to Okinawa. Kiryu explains what the hell is going on in front of the whole orphanage. That's right, kids. I'm saving you, and I'm bringing down an international crime ring to do it. It's a good thing it reads like fiction. They probably all think he's full of it. Kiryu then spends a day and a half dealing with his kids while we wait for a call on Toma's whereabouts, eventually intercepting the attempt on his life at a club. We get Toma out safely. Beat down Joji. And so he agrees to respect Tamiya's wishes and let Toma live, even if it goes against his orders to do so. Toma, meanwhile, is reduced to a guilt-ridden wreck.
Tamiya sensei. すみません。すみませんでした。
We learn that Mine is working with Black Monday, and will likely be making a move on Daigo's location, Toto Hospital in Tokyo. We also learn Joji didn't shoot the two. It was the familiar blonde bloke. Joji isn't blameless, however. Reaching into your breast pocket in a charged situation, well, it caused Daigo and Nakahara to not want to get shot. Yeah, you try not to kill people, but you've been really shit at it so far. But hey, I guess they lived. Luckily, in an answer to an old question about time, Joji has a military jet. Before we can set off, however, Taichi comes running in. Goons are destroying the orphanage. Tamashiro and Mine watch as the building is destroyed. Mikio does a sloppy job defending himself, a doghouse, and the kids. But he lives. Mine expresses his disgust for Kiryu and the children in his care.
お前たちはある意味あの人の被害者なのかもしれないな。
And to the top of the shit list you go. Kiryu's about to rush back to the orphanage. Yeah, way to sum this whole experience up. Back at the ruins, we find Mikio near dead, Rukia injured, and Nakahara has been dragged off to bait Kiryu into a rematch at the bull ring outside of town. Kiryu takes the bait willingly. Rukia begs to come and help save his boss, but Kiryu tells him to stay put, that throwing his life away doesn't make him a man. Kiryu heads into the trap with no intention of going down easy. As bulls enter the ring, Kiryu tries to tackle issues as he always does, by diving in and taking the brunt of the danger, but Tamashiro stops him with a single shot. His job is to keep Kiryu here and occupied for as long as Mine needs. And if Kiryu's dead, well, that makes things a lot simpler. Rukia heads in, announcing he's called the cops and giving Kiryu a vital opening to subdue Tamashiro and turn the situation around.
Nakahara!
なんだと
And as always, people become far, far stupider around firearms. This time, the rescue is moments too slow.
一足遅かったか
As Rukia dies, he goes through an absolute checklist of emotional appeals. Kiryu goes in on every one of them, expressing the most grief he ever has over the death of another character.
力也死ぬな力也力也おい力也おいお前何勝手に死んでんだよおい俺は許さねえぞおい力也死をしろ力也力也
All that's really left at this point is for Kiryu to head to the hospital and put all of this to rest. And hopefully Joji can track down and bring Andre Richardson, the head of Black Monday, to justice. So I apologize for the heavy dose of synopsizing. Let's actually talk about this plot. I praised previous games for being able to put across layered crime mysteries in decently paced chunks. Scenes quickly got across character, motive, and goal. Who was doing what and why. Yakuza 3 is a lot slower and a lot shallower. Going forward, the stories are going to get longer, cutscenes giving way to text boxing as more and more characters sit in office rooms going over fine details. The meeting with Date and the meeting with Tamiya have players get the mystery as it is understood, then outlined to them over half an hour each, with minimal interactivity, followed by Kiryu going and often re-explaining what he learned to characters who were not present. I do see people call Yakuza 3's plot and motivations some of the hardest to grasp, but I would call Yakuza 3 a sickly, overgrown sheep. It's fluffy, but there's little actual meat. My Cliff Notes version of Tamiya's meeting doesn't give us much else. Date's info dump on the Tojo crew get in the way of letting us learn about them organically. It is a sensible beat which gets Kiryu up to speed, and it means when Hamazaki disappears and his boss fight is replaced with Lao Kalong, we have an understanding as to why. Mine is a villain in the spirit of Nishiki or Takashima, a behind-the-scenes schemer. In this story where I feel a lot of the characters either miss the mark or come out half-baked, Mine lands well. He provides an interesting angle on this archetype. Nishiki is a gradual degradation of threat, and his past history of Kiryu makes his betrayal more awkward than tragic, at least until Yakuza 0 can go on to patch it up a little. Takashima just disappears for too much of the plot and has to battle with Ryuji for being impactful. He's closer to a device to get a last-second betrayal than a really interesting character in and of himself. Mine's motivations get more and more complex, and in his limited appearances from Kanda's lapdog to the man who knows the most, we don't see him going from weak to strong, but realize he has been playing the game better than anyone else. Every time he stops to lecture Kiryu, he has a point to make. As we learn of Mine's real reach, everything he does prior to that moment only gains further weight. He doesn't need to appear often because his presence is often felt. I also believe Kanda offers a lot to the plot in his own way. Kanda is a dumb villain, but that's not for the sake of some dumb awkward comic relief with a fat rapist. Kanda being a dumb villain is a stellar way to get across how bad the Tojo is. It's pretty clear from the money troubles and how much friction Daigo refusing a resort deal caused, that after the last 2 games, the Tojo is still recovering. They're short on good men, short on funds, and Daigo is a new leader who is struggling to both learn the ropes and maintain respect. Kanda got out of jail, and following the police backing off the Yakuza, his violent expansionism could flourish. When Mine used him as an in, he also gained an easy stream of money and probably ended up looking more important. He was doing well for himself. But regardless of Mine doing the deed, the Yakuza world would have swallowed him up and spat him out sooner rather than later. The moment anyone better than him could take his place, it would happen. In Yakuza 2, I had a Thug of the Game award, an ironic gesture for a man who was an absolute goon. But I'm half jokingly giving it to Kanda for this game, because he is just a jumped up thug. There have been thugs in lofty positions before. Shimano in Yakuza 1 and Ryuji himself in 2 are thugs who got far based on power. But even then, they respected that the Yakuza was an institution with codes and regulations, and Ryuji had a healthy dose of nepotism. Kanda used his position just to indulge, and he got pretty far with the freedom that smarter Yakuza than him had earned. But it was never going to last forever. Go Hamazaki, while he has little screen time, is clearly an old school Yakuza who uses violence and threats to get his way, but it is built on top of a solid foundation of a man who understands that Yakuza is a group. Mine, meanwhile, uses his business savvy to seemingly treat the Yakuza like any other institution. These two are smart enough to respect the Yakuza, even as they twisted and abused the Tojo. The annoying part about Yakuza 3 is that I feel that a couple of characters really do land, but they are still in a plot that doesn't have much going for it. We have to talk about escalation and scale. It's natural for sequels to raise the stakes and expand the scope. It isn't always for the best, however. Yakuza has so far escalated on each entry. In 1, the Tojo was important. In 2, there was a whole web of groups. 3 sees Kiryu dealing with international criminals and government operatives. Yakuza 1 had 1 kid, 2 had 2, 3 has more than 10. Yakuza 2 had the driving range, 3 had golf. It's pretty clear that not all escalation is for the better, it's what you do with it. It is also a false escalation in a lot of ways. 2 had a technically smaller event feel a lot bigger. The central mystery of the Jingwon massacre unravels in many directions, affects many characters, it echoes throughout the plot, and no one can really escape what happened that night. Yakuza 3 builds its plot on a handful of mysteries of varying importance, and instead of throwing in newer questions, tends to answer them cleanly as we check the mysteries off a list. While the organizations involved are bigger, we see less people in them overall. I know I'm going back to complaining about the same thing yet again, but it's another part of why the orphanage is so irritating. Call me paranoid, but I would gladly believe that the reason the orphanage parts go on as long as they do is besides padding the runtime, it runs you in circles in the hopes you'll only half remember plot beats so they can then be re-explained to you. And I wish to clarify, I am not just arguing that as we go on, each plot needs to get bigger. Every sequel needs more characters and more viewpoints. That would just quickly bloat things terribly. A smaller plot with less characters but better explored is also a fine way to do a sequel. Yakuza 3, however, does less with less. It has pretenses of Kiryu rubbing shoulders with the most dangerous men he has ran across yet, fighting international secret agents and bringing down a criminal organization more destructive than any old normal criminals. but it all feels so small and so shallow and so unbelievably drawn out. It only tops what Yakuza 2 aimed for in concept. Yakuza 2's concept is smaller than this one. I believe with the same amount of characters, hell, even with less characters, Yakuza 3 could achieve the scale adequate for its story that it wants. Length doesn't necessarily equate to how big something feels. Yakuza 2 achieves a lot more in a shorter runtime. A lot of my frustrations with scale really do just come down to mishandling and dragging things out. Rukia is a really important character to the story. Actually, no, he's not. I find him likable at the least, but he feels like another attempt at Daigo, but flubbed in a different way. Rukia wants to have an arc, both to change himself and change something in Kiryu, and the arc happens, and is then thrown out. When we meet him, he's a hot-headed but good-natured small-town Yakuza. He loves Okinawa, and Okinawa loves him back. When Nakahara is shot, he is compelled the same way Kiryu is to get to the bottom of what happened, but because he lacks Kiryu's indestructibility, he's left behind. He flies out to Kamurocho anyway, and while he's immediately lost, a mixture of his luck, good nature, and quick thinking get Kiryu to Kanda. Rukia is best remembered for this joke scene, pretending him and Kiryu are a gay couple to trick their way into a couple's hotel. I myself find this scene funny. It is his most memorable move. It hints at a guile and charisma that, if realized and expanded upon, could make Rukia a good complement to the more straightforward Kiryu. When he dies protecting Kiryu, and he asks whether dying like this is dying for nothing. And that cuts deep. It's sad to say, but in a way he did die for nothing. Kiryu left him behind because he's hot-headed. He tells him that walking into a charged situation with a shot knee isn't bravery, it's stupidity. He lets him know that going into something unprepared and half-cocked when better heads can handle it doesn't make him more of a man. Kiryu tells him to pick his battles, and Rukia picks his battle. And as he dies, he runs through so many praises of Kiryu and asking for validation that it's flipping between tugging on the heartstrings and trying to bring something full circle when... is there any circle to complete here? Rukia's competence and autonomy in the plot fluctuates wildly. He's too small town, naive, young, and hot-headed to handle Kamurocho. But when he gets to Kamurocho, he hits the ground running. His good heart wins him friends. He's a younger, less reserved, sharper version of Kiryu for one canon scene and two optional ones. After that, he's a kid in over his head. When the situation gets too heavy, he admits it. When Kiryu returns and Nakahara is in danger again, it reverts Rukia to hot-headed and angry. Not unjustifiably, but then he goes and dies for reasons that are essentially outside of him. It's nearly the same arc that happened with Daigo. Daigo's bark was worse than his bite, but we don't really see him humbled for it. Even in later scenes, he stands at the back, he still taunts, he still barks. Rukia's, in the end, feels a ton more cynical. He humbles, unhumbles, and as he dies, he has a speech that only has something to do with the last 5 minutes. And as he dies, he begs Kiryu to stop Mine. So sure, let's go get that son of a bitch. I've got stuff to say about him. In Kamurocho, Kiryu is warned by Joji that a team of CIA agents has gone dark. If Kiryu runs into them at Toto, he should expect resistance. After we fight our way through a surprisingly easy final stage, in the room we should find Daigo, we instead find a familiar. All told, CIA man's a bit of a wimp. A boss who we destroy first alone, then down the hall when he has friends, and a gun. The best friend of all. He's even easier then. I also realize why not knowing a language really helps these sound cues. I am baffled by how easy this final level really is. The final level of 2 lined Kamurocho with Korean mafia goons who were individually threatening. First we have thugs for Kiryu to absolutely tear through, which I believe is meant to be easy. Not to mention lockers on every floor give us a heaping pile of health. But then we fight geared up CIA troopers and Kiryu's just that good. On the roof, we do finally find Daigo, comatose and hooked up to machinery. Mine watches over him. Kiryu accuses Mine of attempting to kill Daigo and become the 7th chairman, but the truth does turn out to be a lot more complex than that. Mine explains where he came from and his distaste for Kiryu.
として偉くなりなさい。
Mine worked hard, he sacrificed a lot, but he did make a name and a place for himself. With money and power, he could have anything he wanted, but along the way he realized no one cared about him but what he could do for them. For all of Mine's power, he was empty. Loyalty and friendship became something his work had never earned. He sees the Yakuza as a way to get those things. The romanticized idea of a criminal band of brothers drawn together by a code, meant to treat each other as a family. He bribed Kanta to get him a place, and Daigo was the first person to show him warmth.
大悟さんは極道として経験のない俺を、いや中身のない人間だった俺を普通に迎え入れてくれた。年も俺と変わらない。だけど人の上に立つ男のカリスマがこの人にはあった。俺は影根なしに初めて人を好きになることができたんです。
Daigo then became the first and perhaps only person Mine truly cares about, and seeing Daigo powerless like this hurts Mine more than anything. Mine is a wonderful villain, woefully underserved. His feelings for Daigo are genuine. The things he blames Kiryu for are not wrong, but they are coming from a man warped and twisted by misanthropy and greed. Mine going behind Daigo to keep the resort deal going and thinking he's putting a comatose Daigo out of his misery are betrayals, but not to how Mine sees the world. Mine has devoted his life to the acquisition of wealth and use of power. When Daigo shows him genuine warmth and Mine feels that, he starts trying to repay that kindness and earn that warmth. But regardless of anything, Mine doesn't understand anything but money and power. It is where he is most confident. So his idea of helping Daigo isn't a betrayal, it's helping. When he talks about how he hates leeches and people who only care about money, he can't see that he is just as bad, because he believes he is acquiring money to someone's benefit. When he says the children are victims of Kiryu, besides the fact there is an unfortunate grain of truth in that, that isn't what Mine means. He's lashing out because Kiryu's version of kindness is empty to him. Mine joins the Yakuza world wanting brotherhood and bonds, but he slips in so perfectly as the businessman he has always been. His acumen, his ability to deal with people in an impersonal business context, means that he never had to actually change. But Daigo was still a genuinely good person to him, and that won loyalty. The greatest missed opportunity is in how much this makes Mine like Kiryu. Both of them go above and beyond helping people in their own ways, often short-sighted, often limited. Kiryu uses violence, honesty, and compassion. Mine manipulates and uses money, but they are both guilty of going against the grain, thinking they are helping others. Kiryu still holds a moral high ground, however. Kiryu helps anyone, forgives anything at the slightest hint of remorse. Kiryu's help is unconditional and halted the moment Kiryu realizes he's causing harm. Mine is selfish, cold, calculating, and helped Daigo because he gave him an affection he craved. His loyalty to Daigo is predicated on validation, and because Daigo is comatose, there's no one to set him straight. Ryuji was a great antagonist to Kiryu as a bastardization of a man who follows a code of honor to his own and others' detriment. Mine nearly lands as another great villain for showing a bastardization of one of Kiryu's virtues, Kiryu's endless drive to help others. This is all something I find frustrating yet really interesting with Mine. I praise that he is the most effective take on the schema so far, but that's an archetype that needs a really careful amount of screen time. Too little and they're forgettable, too much and you give too much away. Yet his motive, funnily enough, winds up being based around a dangerous lust for human contact. I like both elements of his character despite their contradiction. Both of these reads land for me. Mine's motive reveal isn't just a fun turn, but a genuinely interesting character and contrast for Kiryu that comes in and goes at the last second. With a similar time frame and exploration that Ryuji got, Kiryu and Mine could have had a really fun dichotomy, but that would also hurt how effective Mine is at playing the schema. Kiryu tries to tell Mine that killing Daigo is a misunderstanding. Daigo isn't powerless. He's still breathing, there is still life there, and there is value in that. Mine pushes that away as Kiryu's typical naivety. He tries to keep cool, but his anger causes him to fire a shot at Kiryu. And finally, a theme comes into sharp focus.
なんであんたはそうなんだ。あんたも俺と同じ孤児だろうが。
I mentioned a long while ago in regards to the orphanage that this game builds Kiryu back up. We've already seen that this game allows Kiryu to succeed where two put in roadblocks. Kiryu trusts Tamiya, and Tamiya ends up being a good man. The Ryudo family ally themselves with Kiryu and the orphanage in light of his good deeds. The lesson Kiryu says he learned from Terada is more or less honored throughout. No matter what, even at the bleakest of times, Kiryu will trust in people. Once again, Mine is right in a lot of what he says about Kiryu, but he's a game late to saying it. He hates that Kiryu didn't become like him despite their coming from similar circumstances. Mine holds his circumstances accountable, but Kiryu doesn't let his misery beget misery. Kiryu will help and forgive where Mine can't. Mine can only help within his narrow understanding of the world, even as he knowingly contradicts what someone he cares for wants. In all of this, Mine is fun to explore, but that isn't the theme of Yakuza 3. Only a small part. The least interesting part of Mine is the theme. There's a great irony that I had to think hard. It was in my second draft where I figured out what was pulling all of Yakuza 3 together, and the fact is, it's family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose for yourself. And how the fuck did I miss that? I mean, yeah, it's the orphanage. It literally opens with a statement of intent. But it says it right at the beginning and then just lets the rest of it play out over so many hours, drowned in child drama and seeing Kiryu be an action dad. While previous games treated the core themes as an almost driving force in the narrative, here it is presented in sub-stories and throwaway dialogue. Mikio has a sub-story where he's in conflict with his birth father, Aragaki. He wants his son to quit the Ryudo and work in a factory far away. He wants him away from this life. We save the dad's life from some Yakuza, uncover some deeper criminal issues about town which his dad is wrapped up in, and we learn that the dad, in his own way, is trying to protect Mikio from a potential gang war coming to the town soon. The story ends with Mikio essentially declaring Nakahara his real father figure, with birth dad's sort of blessing. Nakahara himself has an adopted daughter in Saki. And what is hilarious is that the conclusion of that Yakuza plot in miniature resolved this theme better and more tightly, if more obviously, than the big finale does. She rejects her abusive birth mother, and from then on does see Nakahara as her dad. Nakahara himself has to get over his fear that Saki would definitely choose a blood relative over him. It's not that he's a replacement for a dad, he is just as real as any father to her. Kiryu himself reaffirms this with Joji. Before they fight, Joji taunts that Kiryu could never harm his dad's blood brother. Kiryu spits back that the bond he had with Shintaro went deeper than blood. Kiryu has always chosen his own family. Blood has never meant anything to him. To Kiryu, the difference between friend and family is thin and irrelevant of genetics. For all the crap I've given the orphanage, I also have to mention the difference in cultural context that gives it far more meaning in Japan. I am, pretty obviously, from England, and most of my viewership is American. The orphanage setting and orphans hold meaning to us, but that meaning is fairly different to a Japanese audience. Orphans have a number of stopgaps in Japanese society socially that don't quite exist in the same way in the West. Portraying orphanage kids sympathetically, demonstrating that behind a family registry document is a child, deserving of all the care and opportunities afforded to anyone who just so happened to be luckier when it came to their parentage. Kiryu stating that he sees the orphanage kids as genuine family, while not a big and radical statement, holds a ton more weight in a society that places a lot of social standing on family. I will hold by my complaint that, fuck me, they really lean too heavily on the orphanage throughout this game while it hardly gives back, but I can understand a writer wanting to bring this point to the forefront. While the previous games had tightly written character drama with stories backed up and pulled along by their central theme, Yakuza 3 goes for more of a political thriller that occasionally nods at what it is saying. That doesn't automatically make it worse, it makes it different for sure. I more take issue with how few notes landed. Mine's motivation at the end gave me a lot to stew on. It draws a fun parallel with Kiryu, but it comes just so close to the end and the idea isn't explored much beforehand. Kiryu then of course has to beat some sense into Mine.
桐生さん、これがあなたの最後の戦いです。思いっきり来てください。
言われなくても遠慮はしねえ。とことんやってやるぜ。行くぞ。キリアー！
Mine doesn't go down easy. He's fast, he's dangerous, he's downright deadly. A fantastic moveset backed up by a fantastic soundtrack and a really boring locale. Paired with everything I said about the combat, parries in particular, Mine's a boss that switches how he acts tremendously going in and out of heat mode. I was having fun figuring him out. At least until his heat fried my PS3's motherboard. Yeah, rip, that's why I haven't played Kenzan yet. A mate of mine has since lent me his console, so I can eventually get onto it in Yakuza 4 if those remasters still aren't over here. I mean, hey, this tops anything Ryuji did. When he does go down, however, he lies beaten and bloodied. His phone rings. His secretary is in a panic.
どうしたらよいか。例のドバイの案件の株。
金か。なあ、桐生。
会長、返事を先送りにしていると、先方が態度を変える可能性もあります。会長、お返事ください。会長。
なぜかな。なんか吹っ切れたみたいに穏やかな気分だ。全てが終わる時ってのはこんな気分なのかな。
いや、人間生きてりゃ終わりなんてない。いつだってやり直せるんだ。
Those CIA goons we wrecked before turn up. Mine reveals they are not who they appear. They're Black Monday. Wesker is Andre Richardson, the man Joji is hunting.
Die. What?
Well, that was a little silly, but welcome back, Daigo. As Kiryu sees to Daigo, Andre sees to finishing what he started, and Mine decides that he can change. He charges Andre.
やめるんだ、ミネ！ミネ！
Let me go!
And that was very silly. Or was it? Okay, yeah, it was. Suplexes are rarely solemn. But there is a good sentiment in how Mine died. Mine had a choice in killing Andre. It would have been less silly if he had to, say, tackle him off the roof in a split-second decision, but that would have been less impactful. Mine caught Andre away from the edge. From that moment, the situation was resolved. Kiryu could step in and stop it. Joji is moments away, not that anyone knows. Mine grabs and pulls Andre. He dies, killing the link between the Tojo and Black Monday. He repays Daigo's kindness, purposefully, without money. It's a fitting symbolic gesture, and it is redemption. It just looks goofy as shit. Daigo asks if Mine was the traitor.
いや、違う。あいつは、ミネは裏切り者なんかじゃない。
The game does then end on an odd note. Kiryu is once again departing Kamurocho and saying another set of farewells to Kazuki and Yuya. He comes face to face with a disheveled, dirt-poor Hamazaki, mad that because of Kiryu he lost everything. Kiryu says back that he should make up for what he's done. He's at rock bottom and came back from facing death. Right now, he can only go up, he can do anything. Kiryu even says he'll help him get back on his feet, extending his hand. Hamazaki smiles, walks forward, and stabs him. Yelling that once you're dead, nothing mattered, believing in people's worthless. But Kiryu, bleeding from the gut, refuses to accept that. Haruka is in a panic, Yuya and Kazuki tackling Hamazaki to the ground, as Kiryu says that Mine's shown him that, even in your last moments, you should believe in others.
人間、死ぬ間際でもモテるんだってことを。
Then the credits roll, leaving Kiryu's fate ambiguous, which, well, several more games exist and he's on the box of them. He's fine. This trick will be pulled twice more and it feels cheap the first time around, even ignoring the future stuff. The post-credit scene just shows him, alive and well. It's a strange lesson Kiryu is relating at the end anyhow. It's the lesson he learned from Terada, but now he's given it over to Mine. I know it's nitpicky, but we're ending on Kiryu giving Haruka a lesson on forgiving the man who just stabbed him. It's equally goofy. The lesson had some weight with Terada, because despite Terada killing many others and attempting to kill Kiryu, he asked for trust at a time when Kiryu had no better options. All I'm saying is Kiryu's sainthood is really overdue. If he actually copped it, he may have well gotten it on the spot. That about wraps up Yakuza 3. I have complained a lot, but I don't think it's bad. It is, in my opinion, the weakest mainline entry, but it still has its interesting points even if they are heavily bogged down. Yakuza 3 saw a change of console generation, a change in director, and departure of the crime novelist Hasei Seishu, who aided on the first two entries. In fact, Moving forward, a lot of the changes in pacing and tone from Yakuza 1 and 2, well, they're staying. Yakuza 1 and 2 are in many ways downright alien to the later entries, but the later entries aren't bad. Narratively, it's longer, slower, and shallower. It turns down elements of heroic bloodshed and explores less of the criminal underworld in favor of an odd mix of slice of life and political thriller. The criminal underworld has less bite, and the interaction with government agencies is just skimming a strange surface. For a political thriller, there's little to no, well, politicking. There's a strange swirling miasma of what Yakuza 3 wants to say and do, and it so often gets lost in itself before retreating back to the orphanage to buy itself time to breathe. Character arcs stop short, resolve early or not at all, or change midstream. The central theme trips itself over. Kiryu gets to be a dedicated father to his kids and the Yakuza around him, and the villain is about a game late to call him out. Yet he does. Mine is a fantastic villain in a plot that is made for him and his sensibilities, yet also fails to make adequate use of him. His death and his resolution is sort of helped, but unbelievably undermined by the ridiculousness of how it plays out. Mechanically, Yakuza 3 is very important. A lot of the DNA of later entries that people like originates here, but is far less pronounced. It doesn't demand attention the same way later entries do. It's a talented middle child that lacks charisma or personality. It's proficient and gifted, but coming up short of leveraging what it has. I am glad it was my entry point to the series. Whether I went backwards or forwards from here, I would have had a better experience in some way. And that is Yakuza 3. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the creation of further videos like this, please spread it around. You can also support me on Patreon. Those in the $5 tier get access to bonus afterthought videos where I go over last second thoughts, extra details, and get viewer questions about the game answered. $3 tier gets access to script and notes, and everyone who contributes gets added to the list of lovely people who are scrolling past right now. Next time, 4th entry, 4 characters, a fucking absurd plot twist. I hope you'll join me when we hit Yakuza 4.